Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a source that presents a genuinely wild, sweeping worldview. We're going to map out a narrative that takes something incredibly modern and grounded, South Korea's massive multi-billion-dollar semiconductor boom, and connects it to an ancient spiritual destiny. It's this grand, unorthodox theory that completely reframes economics, history, and literally the future of the globe. So let's just dive right in. This source actually kicks off with a very real, immediate economic debate. Right now, South Korea is bracing for a huge influx of tax revenue, thanks to its exploding tech and semiconductor sectors. I mean, it's a windfall of historic proportions. But the immediate dilemma presented here is who actually gets to control this wealth? What should the government do with this unprecedented pile of cash? To really understand the speaker's argument, we'll trace their logic from this immediate economic question all the way to a grand historical vision. We'll cover the semiconductor tax windfall, corporate investment versus welfare, democracy, communism, and economics, the upcoming political inflection, reinterpreting South Korean history, and finally, a global leadership vision. Section 1. The Semiconductor Tax Windfall. The Catalyst. The speaker views this semiconductor success not just as some lucky market break or a routine government win. Instead, it's described as a literal national fortune. The source argues this wealth was built on the blood, sweat, and intense sacrifices of the entire Korean populace over generations of absolute hardship following the Korean War. And because of that heavy history, this boom is seen as almost sacred. The speaker warns it absolutely must not be wasted on putting out immediate economic fires or just appeasing current voters. Instead, it has to be fiercely protected. It needs to be treated as foundational seed money specifically designed to sustain the nation for the next 100 years. Section 2. Corporate investment versus welfare. Now here is where the speaker draws a very hard line. They are fiercely against any government plans to take this tech-generated revenue and use it for broad cash handouts or expansive welfare programs. Why? Well, the source argues that taxing corporations heavily just to buy short-term political popularity, like, say, securing votes with immediate relief checks, is a dangerous trap. In the high-stakes, hyper-competitive global tech arena, bleeding these companies dry for welfare destroys the continuous, massive investments they need to stay ahead. Once the tech boom eventually fades, the speaker warns, the country will be left with nothing but heavy recurring debt and a totally hollowed-out industry. To drive this point home, the speaker makes a truly bold, paradigm-shifting claim. They say corporations themselves are the South Korean government. It's a pretty wild shift in perspective, right? The argument here is that moving forward, it's the corporations, not traditional politicians, who are the actual leaders of society. In this view, the state's only real job is to act as a supportive backdrop, essentially clearing the runway for corporate growth. The logic is that it's the tech giants, not the lawmakers, who are actually securing the nation's power and relevance on the global stage. Section 3. Democracy, Communism, and Economics. This debate over welfare reveals the source's deeply binary ideology. The transcript explicitly equates heavy government welfare policies to a communist rationing system. Think of it almost like a cage. The speaker argues that massive wealth redistribution doesn't actually uplift everyday people. Instead, it traps them, enslaving the populace to a ruling political party where only the party elites actually get wealthy. In stark contrast, the source champions free democracy as the only economic system that allows for genuine, unbounded growth, letting prosperity fly free rather than locking it down under strict government control. And the speaker actually quantifies this with a curiously specific, hard number. They claim that mathematically, any distribution or ration-based economy hits a hard ceiling at exactly 40% of its potential capacity. So under this framework, a welfare-heavy state will inevitably stall out at that 40% mark, completely failing to evolve or develop society any further, simply because the fundamental incentive to grow has been entirely stripped away. Section 4. The upcoming political inflection. Building on those economic warnings, the source outlines a highly specific timeline for South Korea's immediate future. We're currently approaching what they call an inflection point, right around 2025 and 2026. During this brief 2-year window, the speaker predicts that all of society's systemic flaws and political contradictions are going to be completely laid bare for everyone to see. This massive public exposure will trigger a political cleanup starting in 2027, leading to a complete societal reorganization by 2028. After the dust settles, the 2030s will act as a quiet preparation phase, ultimately launching the country into its normal orbit of true global leadership by the 2040s. Now, if you've ever watched the news and wondered why current politics seems so relentlessly chaotic, well, the speaker actually has a rationalization for that. The transcript argues that current governments are stuck in a deliberate trial and error phase. Today's politicians aren't actually supposed to succeed. Instead, they're inadvertently serving a grander purpose by stumbling, failing, and exposing all those systemic flaws. And why? All because the true, visionary leaders of the future simply haven't stepped onto the stage yet. Section 5. Reinterpreting South Korean History. To justify this intense trajectory toward global dominance, the source takes a massive, highly controversial leap into historical revisionism. The speaker completely reframes the 36-year Japanese occupation of the peninsula. Rather than viewing it purely as devastating colonization, the transcript describes it as a necessary international mechanism. They claim it was essentially a harsh, externally driven wake-up call designed by the wider geopolitical environment to jolt a dormant Korea, which they literally call a sleeping lion, out of its deep isolation and forcefully push it onto the world stage. And this radical reinterpretation extends way back into ancient history too. The source claims that ancient Korean empires like the Three Kingdoms weren't just confined to the peninsula like we're traditionally taught, but actually dominated massive expanses of the Chinese mainland. So you might be wondering, why isn't this in the history books? Well, the speaker alleges a grand cover-up. They claim foreign powers and international academics are terrified of Korea's true potential, so they actively suppress this history, deliberately confining the narrative strictly to the peninsula to keep the nation's geopolitical ambitions in check. Section 6. A Global Leadership Vision. All of this intense historical revisionism serves as the bedrock for the speaker's ultimate conclusion regarding South Korea's spiritual destiny. The speaker bestows a grand, almost mythical title on the Korean people, calling them the descendants of heaven. According to this worldview, these descendants were strategically pushed back and hidden on the peninsula for centuries. The ultimate purpose? To perfectly preserve their lineage, their distinct culture, and their seed until the exact right historical moment to step forward and lead the globe. And according to the source, that historical moment is right now. In this upcoming era, these descendants of heaven are prophesied to execute 3 monumental steps in sequence. First, they must achieve the seemingly impossible unification of North and South Korea. Second, they'll break out of the geographic confines of the peninsula. And third, they're going to emerge to literally, in the speaker's exact words, hold a guiding lantern to illuminate the future path for the rest of humanity. Ultimately, the speaker's vision leaves absolutely no room for modesty. The transcript predicts an era of absolute supremacy. They argue that South Korea will never settle for being a middle-tier power. They won't accept 7th place, or even 5th place. Instead, the nation is destined to confidently operate as the first, second, or third leading power in the entire international community, standing shoulder to shoulder with the absolute highest echelon of global hegemony. So, as we wrap up this explainer, we're left with a pretty profound question. The debate over how to handle real-world semiconductor wealth is happening right now. But does this economic windfall truly signal the awakening of a hidden, spiritual superpower destined to lead humanity? Or is this grand narrative simply an extraordinary, unorthodox piece of storytelling designed to inspire immense national pride? Whatever you believe, it's a fascinating, massive framework to keep in mind as we watch South Korea navigate its incredible technological boom in the decades ahead. Thanks for joining me, and keep questioning the narratives that shape our world.